could be identified as using marijuana. Part of the early avant-garde popular music subculture that was centered on the riverboats going up and down the Mississippi and the tributaries with jazz, that indecent new form of music that would inflame the passions and lead people into moral miscreants. And who were the musicians? The blacks. So here's one way to get rid of these upstart blacks. Now, the other identified population with marijuana use were Mexicans. Those threats to the job market that were migrating northward to take what few jobs remained in this bleak and barren, scary time. And so another obvious hit population. And so in California and in Texas, this population was also targeted for removing them from the job market. And so this successful campaign then has brought upon us an over 60 years dark ages with regard to clinical information about the drug. And we've been fed dogmatism and pap instead of being permitted to explore these medical realities. Well, this became increasingly ludicrous and draconian at the same time. The Controlled Substances Act of 1970 was an excrescence put together by the federal criminal justice elements in the Justice Department, and I might say that their advisory panel of physicians and scientists quit before the final draft. But this flawed blueprint for classifying drugs, or I should say demonizing drugs, totally unscientific and totally disconnected with actual harm. And so we have this this bimodal or two-world way of prescribing and dealing with drugs that are totally disconnected and totally irrational, and based upon special interest groups plus the legal system will remain in place as long as they are able to manipulate information to suit them. For example, 120,000 people died of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug side effects. 0 have died from any cannabis side effects. I can't quote you the number of alcohol and nicotine deaths and morbidities, but they are substantial. Now, how come we have this disconnect at the drug policy level where we have General McCaffrey, a living symbol of what's wrong with a drug problem? First of all, you define it as a war and apply the simple-minded military mind to these kinds of solutions. And they've shown the same kind of incompetence. Barry McCaffrey is just a perfect example of who you would not want to have for drug policy. Here he is, a Vietnam-era officer, trainee, and cooking the books, and lying to Congress and fabricating figures. He then moves on to the next stage of his career of the Southern Command, where they install and deinstall governments, something like new motors in old cars. At least this is their kind of Leviathan, top-down management authoritarian idea. And so, is it any wonder that Barry McCaffrey acts like this behind-the-scenes Jesuit as he tries to suborn and meddle with California affairs? But because of his incompetence, he really, in a way, strikes a blow for the failure for them, and also an aid to our critical thinking. I mean, these are toxins. These are ideologic poisons that he's out there spreading. That it's a question of whose mind can be poisoned more quickly with these wrong ideas. But this is the way drug policy oozes in this country. And so as a result, we have in California, we are number one. Number one in prisons. And the prison industrial complex has really taken over and kicked butt. It outspends the California Medical Association because there are more prison guards now than physicians, and definitely outspends the educational lobbies from the teachers' unions and the other educational interests. And so in California, with the prison industrial complex calling the shots, we have an epidemic of stupidity. And so we are setting up centers of lower education and obliging California to drain brains from other places outside the state or the world. Now finally, not to offend you Republican people out there, the mean-spirited, niggardly, I'm properly pronouncing that, niggardly, cheap, and really offensive class-dominated budgeting has produced a breakdown in our different kinds of social institutions. And this incompetent mercantilization of things is definitely the spirit of both the Clinton administration, as he, in his slack-jawed fashion, gives Barry McCaffrey support after their cover was blown as to how they attempted to manipulate the media, but didn't exactly pull it off with altering different storylines to insert self-serving anti-drug messages. Now, thank you very much, Barry McCaffrey, for increasing critical thinking and opposition, and the realization of this is just a combination of dogma and incompetence in action. And we have the same kind of thing in California, but we have a different form where one of the big excuses for California peace officers, judges, and district attorneys not to enforce the law is, well, we're waiting for the feds. We're waiting for the federal government to exert their hegemony and, lead us, kind of light. Well, judging from the follies here inside the Beltway, where we're broadcasting from, I think you're going to wait a long time. They don't have the political will nor the ability to mount an effective campaign. So you see the example of the flawed attempt to cook the books and wire the media. This is coming to an end because of having nothing to show for it. The drugs, the evil drugs, the powdered drugs are purer, cheaper, and there's really been no impact. What they're really not acknowledging is the erasure of the separation between church and state, and the jettisoning of posse comitatus that keeps the military out of civil enforcement. Well, guess what? When you send our boys down to Central America and South America and Mexico, what do you think they're going to be learning from the Mexicans, who have lifted the art of the mordida to heights that we can't imagine? When you drive across the border and park your car in any border town, there'll be your local Mexican official being pleased to provide security for your car as he stretches his hand out. Well, this is the philosophy that unfortunately seems to go all the way to the top. And so if we want to have a regression to the lowest common denominator, we just need to continue on the narco hegemony foreign policy, because we don't know what foreign policy we have. Who's calling the shots? What's going on with the DEA contingent down in in Colombia? Oh yes, we want to have, say, the Colombian model here in the United States. Do we wish to have judges that have to be masked or behind one-way mirrors so they can't be identified for fear of assassination? Do we want to have that degradation in trust?